Okay, so hi guys, my name is Dr. Fuller here. I'm just going to give you some ideas about campaigns and how to win local elections. Just some strategies for local politicians, or maybe on a national scale, or incumbents, for example. I just want to give you some tips and general advice about how to run and how to win an election. Um, Politicians sometimes often don't. One of the things you have to do is, as a politician, you have to really know your district. You have to understand your district, and you have to be realistic about the area you run in, and you have to have a general platform for one thing. That's really important. Have something voters can identify with you, and clearly they have a chance of knowing and feeling comfortable uh, with your with your personality, with what you want to bring. If you're a new guy who's just coming around to politics and trying to win locally, one thing I would advise, compared to people who have run before and who already hold an office, incumbents already have the advantage because most of the time when they're elected, they're usually likely to get re-elected. All right. So that's one advantage actually incumbents have. Essentially, I'd say like 85 or 90% of incumbents probably win re-election most of the time. And this is for any like city, state, or city, county, state, or national election. I'm going to just give advice for it. All right, because it's really important to know these things. And I got to work at CNN, do some, I've done an internship doing some politics stuff when I was an undergrad, and I also got to work in a couple of political campaigns. One was like an incumbent in Congress who had been around for a little while, in a pretty safe district actually. Another one was a colleague of mine who went to grad school with me. He decided to run for a local election and small scale kind of thing. So there are differences, but there are also some similarities here in the way you approach things. I would say for first time politicians, one of the strategies that really works is you have to know your district. Essentially, you really want to know and understand who your voters are. Uh, And the first piece of advice I would give them anyway, if you're going to scope out a district to win in, if it's a local election, find one that's local and find one that's easy to win. If you're starting out, it's hard to go start at the top of the mountain. Okay, you have to build things in like little baby steps. Win a local election, like the water board, Department of Education, maybe some other district that you have a really good chance of winning. Nobody else, in fact, if it's like a special election or if it's unopposed, most of the time, if you look at and you check on a ballot box for like elections, and they have the national election people, you have the senators, the representatives, the U.S. ones. The local election levels, sometimes you start to have people who are actually like unopposed, basically. They keep winning. Sometimes local judges, that are elected, um, they're actually, or some states have those, or they have these small seats. Like I said, Board of Education or the Water Department. Nobody really, not many people are going to run for those, and you might even win anywhere from a few hundred to a few thousand votes to win. So as long as you can start small and you can build a base and a following for a couple years, then you can start to move up the ladder a little bit. But you really want to start small right here first, and don't try to be too ambitious first. Okay. Um, so look, getting to know your district is important. A heavily liberal or conservative or Democrat or Republican district is safer also. If it's a real safe bet, there's no chance of you losing. That's really what you want to do. Find out where nobody else is going to win, or even let's say if there's somebody who's going to retire, you're not competing against someone who's already been there for a while. Okay, so that's more realistic. But it's easier and more practical also to run for a if you're starting out, run for a mainstream party. If you really want to have a chance locally, occasionally you do see like Libertarian Party people, or maybe even like we saw some years ago when we had a candidate Reform Party, Jesse Ventura in Minnesota as the governor. He ran for Ross Perot's old party. Okay, usually those third party elections aren't as common. It doesn't mean that they don't win, but it's harder at the local level to sometimes. Occasionally, they do pretty well. They can actually become like getting Congress and all that too, eventually. But local elections are it's safer to start with Democrat or Republican, and in a district that's highly skewed one way or the other. I mean, if it's like 70 or 80% Republican or 80 something percent Democrat, or same thing, 70 or 80% Democrat, start there. Make it simple. Be realistic. The county election board. I mean, if you know, or let's say if you work at a local election level, and you get to know the county Republicans or the county Democrats, get to know these key people. Get to really know them and become friends with them. Build a local following where you know you have a chance. Okay, so that means be realistic about your goals. Know you can run in a district and you have a clear chance of winning. Um, Voter registration lists are also really practical and a really easy way to find out who your voters are, who's actually registered. You can probably get a map of your district also. It's actually very cheap to get a voter registration list. Sometimes they could be anywhere from $25 to $50 at the local level, and you can request that. The county clerk can do that for you. I actually ended up doing that for a friend of mine who was running for election in a small town in Arkansas, like a local election. Okay. Originally I'm from Georgia, and I grew up in a mid-sized city in Georgia. Wasn't too big, but I got an idea how things work about the national versus state level, like U.S. Congress versus local. I mean, there are some differences, but I mean, the advantage is, like I said, once you're in and you build a following, you build a base, you can win. Let me tell you something really interesting. I said start small. I know a businessman who went to high school with me years ago. Um, and the guy actually ended up, he worked for a while, was pretty successful at a big company, decided to run for local office, and I remember him talking about it several years ago. Well, I found out he apparently did end up winning like a local city, no, county board of education, and he won by like one vote, literally one vote. So sometimes even a few hundred votes, or if that's all you need, it can make a difference. Even that one vote, if you can find out who that is, try to get to know those people. You might have to go door to door. You might have to shake some hands. Get to know the ones who are locked in to a certain party. Start with those people, and then you can kind of go with people on the fence who may not be registered voters, or might be independents. Um, and figure out how many you need, like what percentage you need to win. If there's a chance that you will be able to continue. Um, uh, Maximize where you have to go to campaign if you're going on a campaign also. You want to save on a budget as much as possible, so try to reduce distance and travel time when you do this. That's also crucial. Okay. So these things: local district, know your district, win in a district you know you can win. Be realistic about your goals, and make sure that you're able to sustain a campaign. If you're on a budget, remember your budget's going to be smaller if you're just starting out compared to an incumbent who might have been in for a while. It's easier to attract donors, and it's easier to attract campaign funding when you've been established already. So make it easy on yourself. All right. These are things to be aware of. Another thing sometimes I can talk about too is the polls. If you're going to get an idea of maybe if you're just where your voters lie in certain areas, like I said, be known for platforms. If you have a general platform and you have like something that you feel like voters can identify with you, it's okay to have that as your major issue. Okay, your major platform issue. Education reform. Maybe judicial system. You're trying to do something to reform the judicial system, for example. Maybe it's easier for people to identify some kind of one particular thing with you, or personality trait that people like about you. Also, be very personable, very respectful. That's really important to do. Okay. Um, so why that's important is if you're going to look and find, you might want to hire spin doctors for one thing. That's what people call like the people who kind of follow the polls, or they generate polls and try to get some information of where candidates are and how voters feel about them. Sometimes you might just be able to look up, I would say look up the reliable polling data like Gallup, Harris, and Roper polls, which are more statistically sound. The bigger sample size, pretty accurate information. You might be able to get an idea of where people are on certain issues by following these polls. and they do pretty frequent polling every periodically, so that will help you to get some idea of where you are probably going into an election cycle, and also going into the campaign and in the last few days, especially before when election day comes. So it's important that if you're going to run for office, your the other candidates, you understand that if there are any. But I would say start go in a place that you have a safe district, like if you start out and have a realistic chance of winning. If you're always trying to battle it out in every election, it's pretty hard and difficult, and you're going to have to do a lot more campaigning and spend more money. So more money equals more time, more resources needed. Basically, if people run out of money, especially as we see incumbents on a national scale or like U.S. elections, the congressional elections, if they run out of money, it's hard to really keep going. But you don't have to spend as much if you're in a safe district and you know you have a chance of winning. All right, it might save you a little stress and a little bit of a headache. Being realistic, following the polls, understanding what people want. Polling people is really good for that sometimes. You can generate your own polls and have people help you out, or you can follow some maybe get one of these other polling organizations that does this and figure it out. Okay. Um, so another thing that's sort of important also with campaigning is understanding who the donors are, getting to know these people, these organizations that back certain politicians. If you have a really good relationship with like a union, for example, or like a teachers union, one side, and the other side, let's say a more conservative candidate might have maybe a relationship with a retired American Association of Retired Persons, like a local chapter, or like a local NRA chapter. Some of these lobbying groups are very powerful and very influential. If you can get their backing on either side, a large organization, that might make it easier for people to endorse you. In fact, sometimes it's free advertising. If you can appear with them at events and they know who you are, that's a very practical thing to do. But be careful not to isolate or alienate certain voters because they may not feel. You got to make them confident and feel comfortable in you. Having good public speaking skills is also really good. Having good speech writers and people who can give people, the public, the confidence they need to feel like this person is qualified to run for office. Very important. All right. I would say don't be angry and start cussing people out or swearing or appearing very a little extreme on either. Well, it's okay to be happy and everything else, but what happened to Howard Dean in 04, I don't know if people know this or have seen this at all on the web. When he started getting really excited, he made like kind of a screen that just picked up on the news everywhere. He was a serious candidate at one point for the Democratic seat for the presidency, and this kind of outburst he had just just went too far. The media started making fun of it. Comedians started just basically killed his campaign. All right, you want to be confident, but you also want to appear very level-headed and stable, and you're able to get voters' interest in a way where they feel comfortable with you. Okay, and you're very kind and very warm, and someone who is not angry or you start doing things out of desperation, public speaking, especially in a public event. Everybody's got a camera these days. Everybody knows what's going on. That little soundbite you have, 5 or 10 second soundbite, might make it on the news out of a perfect 10 or 15-minute speech you do. So I would say at all times be aware of where you are in your situation, and make sure you sound and appear confident when you do speak. All right. Um, like I said, get to know local donors. One thing also is mentoring. The mentoring process really helps a lot too. Get to know an older politician who can sort of guide you along and show you the ropes about when you do a campaign. Um, Someone who's been there before might know the tips and strategies that are involved with running for office and staying around a long time. Also, if you want to build and you want to start small and locally, and then you want to build up a little more to run for a higher office, make a name for yourself, be practical, um, build a base, but also have a mentor to guide you along. Really important. I mean, a lot of people, we talk about mentors in the business world and other places, but mentoring is really important for politicians to be successful as well. All right, so that's just like with anything. Also, another thing I'll mention is if you get local people to help you in your campaign who work for other politicians, sometimes you work together. It saves on resources and time and money. All right. So if you're all confident and you're all aware of each other out there, and you have a friend in the who's running for office as well, it's okay to use some of the same people to help you out, like volunteers. I remember helping out some other politician with this local election of an incumbent when I was in Georgia. Um, I remember that some of his people that were assisting the other people behind the scenes, like setting up signs, getting the word out there about the campaigns. But and if you're backing one candidate as well, if you have other candidates you can identify with, you might be able to tap into those resources and their source of funding. If you get to know the local party, like I mentioned too, and they like you, that helps a lot. You don't want to be isolated. You don't want to be a stranger. That doesn't really help to get people to know you. You're introduced to key people at events. All that stuff ties together. If you get to know all these people and they help you out, you help them out, they're going to help you out when you need it. Okay, so that's really important. So we mentioned things about getting to know your district, starting out. Be realistic about where you start out. Um, know you can win in this seat, and if it's a small local election, try to find one that's a really highly skewed in Democrat or Republican or liberal conservative district. Okay, pay attention to the polls and try to gauge where voters' interests are. Maybe come up with a platform, something they can identify themselves with. Really good veteran politicians also use a lot of these strategies, but they're also able to sustain a campaign because they're known for something. Certain politicians are known for one particular issue, and they continually get reelected on those things all the time. Uh, you know, in fact, even we know that, like, let's say John Kerry in Massachusetts, he was known for, well, he ended up being the Secretary of State, right? But in Massachusetts, maybe his foreign policy experience, his expertise, ended up launching a higher level political career. He ran for the presidency, now he's Secretary of State. That type of thing really does factor into getting to know yourself. I mean, that's just a big, large scale, but in general, if you have a campaign platform people can identify with, that helps a lot. All right. Get to know your district and map out the area, the voters who are likely to be voting for you. Get the voter registration list and ensure that you follow that as much as you can, because that does help and saves you some time and money. Get a source of funding so you don't run out too. That's also real important. We mentioned and the mentoring process. All this stuff is very crucial. Um, you know, the whole thing about the public speaking and also oratory skills. That's if you get free PR by having the media come along and cover a certain particular event, appear confident because all that free publicity will help a lot. I know we're in an internet age where there's a big mass media presence, but um, if you have a good relationship with the media and you're able to use that to your advantage, go for it. So anyway, I thought I'd just mention all this stuff and all the experience I've had just working with campaigns and also working in media a little bit and then teaching. These things I picked up on. So and then working a little bit in DC too. About politicians and everything. So and I also mentioned lobbying organizations. If you get to know the big, powerful, the big spenders, the donors, that helps. All right. So it's a teamwork effort basically running a campaign. It's not just one person. You have to have all your bases covered. You want to really make sure you do a little bit of research before you to be successful. Okay. So all right. See you, guys, and have a nice day. All right. Thank you.